Welcome to another episode of Tomes and Tunes. I am your host, Arielle Silver, coming to you from Los Angeles, California, USA. I am not a native Angelino. I am an East Coaster and got myself over here at some point. And that airplane that you can hear going overhead, I like to imagine that it's headed back to whence I came. And so if you're on the East Coast, maybe that airplane that just went overhead leaving from Burbank Airport near me, maybe it's on its way to JFK or Logan or something like that, in which case in 6 hours look up to the sky and say hi. So like I said, I'm Arielle Silver. This show, Tomes and Tunes, if this is your first time tuning in, this is a weekly talk that I have with songwriters from around the world about books, because that's the other thing I love, one of the other things I love, and we do a little song swap at the end. So who knows where the conversation will go. It has gone every which way, and it's always a delightful little bit of time on Thursdays. So, what can I tell you first? Tomes and Tunes we're in our 70th episode, if you can think back 70, 80 weeks ago. It was sort of the beginning of COVID, at least the beginning of the quarantine here in Los Angeles. And in addition to live music venues closing down and, of course, gigs, in-person gigs stopping, the other thing that I was missing besides the audiences and just that opportunity to, sing and tell stories from a stage and connect with people in that way, the other thing I was missing was just that conversation with songwriters. These other people that are wandering around the world kind of taking in, life and processing it in their own way, but maybe in a similar way to the way that I do. So I started Tomes and Tunes as a way to keep that conversation going even as things shut down. And of course now we're in this hybrid world where things are opening, closing, back and forth. I hope that you are all healthy and safe during this time, and thank you for joining me. I want to start off the show and just say that there have been a lot of cool things actually that have emerged during this time. I think that constraints foster creativity, and some folks out there in the world have gotten really creative about how to manage the change of their creative life, the change of their professional life as musicians, as writers, whatever it is that they're doing. One of the people that is doing some really cool work I think the idea actually started before COVID, to have a live music venue and community center in Los Angeles. But when COVID hit, the creator, Brent Neufer, also known as Arthur Autumn, had to think about that for a second. We just started the first day of autumn, second day of autumn now, so Arthur, this is your time. But he has created this thing called Electric Moon. If you go to electricmoon.org, open it up on a browser and kind of bookmark it for after this show is over. Take a peek around, walk around. It's a 3D experience. It's super cool. When you first go to electricmoon.org, you're going to land on a city street, and you have to orient yourself and open up that red door to enter the venue. It's now a location that offers virtually classes for kids and coffee for the adults. And today I am going to be his very first guest in the artist-to-artist conversation that they're going to start having. It's very cool. So bookmark that. I'll be on that show at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time tonight, and you can get the link to that if you've lost your browser window through that linktree/ArielleSilver that's scrolling around the bottom there. electricmoon.org. It's such a cool thing. I'm a big fan of all kinds of creativity, and this is a really inspiring evolution out of this time of immense challenge, right? Just going to take a peek in the chat box. Hello, the Kurth Kitchen. Thanks for being here. My guest today, I think, is a friend of yours, and very excited. I first encountered Yosi Mesbah during a song circle on Zoom, of course, because that's how these things go. And when Yosi popped up into the song circle, I heard her music and I was like, I want to hear more of that. I want to know where this stuff is coming from. So I'm really excited to bring her here on the show today. In fact, I'm just going to do that right now. Where are you? There you are. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun. And two of my favorite subjects, music and books.
I know, right?
So good.
I mean, it's like, what's better than that? Um, oh, and the Kurth Kitchen says she's my foodie buddy. So as soon as you said two of my favorite things, music and books, I was thinking in chocolate and wine. Those work too. but um, I'm really delighted to have you. And when I was looking over your website and sort of getting to know you a little bit, because we have never had a conversation before, you and I, and this is not, not the first time on this show that my guests, sometimes I know my guests rather well, and sometimes we're just meeting and having our first conversation right here on the show. And it's actually been pretty cool. I've now played some shows in person with some of the folks that have been on this show. So it's pretty cool. But as I was getting to know you and looking over your website, I noticed a couple of things. Your bio says that you were born in Moscow, Idaho. You are Iranian-American, and trying to think of what the other thing was. Maybe that you moved to Los Angeles or grew up in the Pacific Northwest or something like that, right? But the other thing I noticed, so that sort of like oriented me. I really love when bios kind of give me like sort of a location, a geographic place. I've lived in 8 states myself, and so it helps me to sort of, it's like an internal compass. Like,
Right.
oh, that person lived to the west of me or to the north, or we crossed paths maybe. The other thing about your bio, though, that I found myself kind of thinking about later was there's a sense of identity with being a songwriter. I'm not sure how your bio phrased it exactly, but you sort of like embraced that identity. You said, yes, this is me. This is who I am. This is what I want to do. This is my profession. This is what I aspire to be, I suppose. I don't know how, like, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, when did you decide consciously, oh yes, I identify as a songwriter. I am a songwriter.
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I'm either really courageous or really silly or a mixture of both. Like probably a little ignorant because I kind of identified with music when I was very young and started writing songs when I was 12. And I think I had a group of folks around me that didn't know anything about music and making it into a profession, and so my parents and my family were kind of against it, but I'm pretty stubborn too, and so I don't really listen to no very well when it comes to things that feel true in my being, and so yeah, I moved through the world pretty intuitively. So I can't say that there was like a moment, like an epiphany and like, oh, I'm a songwriter. I just started writing songs and connecting experientially to the music that I was surrounded by as a kid. And yeah, and it just kind of evolved. I couldn't think of anything else I'd rather be doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know this. You're an artist. You see the power of the art that you create, and then
Yeah, there's that thing though. Here comes the other plane. It's gonna happen like every 5 minutes. It just is. But there's that thing. There's a difference between writing songs and identifying as a songwriter. And that's interesting what you said about how your family wasn't necessarily backing this idea, and that you had there was something in you that was strongly oriented toward, yes, this is my direction. And I think that strong orientation is required for that embrace of a specific identity. I don't know. I was just really struck by it. Like, not just that you write songs, not just that you started writing songs, at age 12 or whatever, but like that you identified in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't think about it very much. You just move through and you just do it. So I mean, I don't know. It's kind of cool in that way, because I always knew that I needed to do something music related.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's been my being's orientation. So I've explored other
Hmm.
things and I have all sorts of skills, but the music seems to be the thing that's the most impactful and does what I want to do in the world. And so
Right.
it's really important to me that the things that I do actually have some kind of a meaning. If I'm going to be spending most of my time doing it, I'm really oriented towards purpose.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
yeah, and so yeah, I tried the do miscellaneous jobs and then do your craft on the side, and that's kind of what's been working for me as I sort of develop a creative voice and develop a writing voice and kind of traverse. I'm 27 now, so pretty young, but like the past decade or so, decade and a half, I guess now. Oh goodness. Of just kind of figuring out what it means to be an artist in the world. And I
Right.
don't think, I think everybody has the capability to manifest the quality of creativity. I think we all have it. And somewhere
Yeah.
along the line, people convince themselves that they are not creative. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the work that I get to do traveling the country as a troubadour, because I travel and tour by myself, and up until now have mostly been playing house concerts and conferences and the like, is just the conversations that I get to have with audiences afterwards
Yeah.
and during.
100%.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite things to do because I can talk to the emotion or the feeling of what somebody went through the show, and then also reorient them back to maybe something that they forgot, which I
Mm.
notice in our society often is this quality of, oh, well, if I'm not a professional musician or if I'm not a professional painter, then I must not be creative. And so,
Right. Totally.
you know what I mean? So just helping orient and model a more hopefully a holistic approach to using your talents and capacities to uplift the space around you is something that's really important to me. And I felt like it was more influential than if I was just going around and paying lip service, like, oh yeah, you're creative, you should do art, trying to encourage young people and older people to invest in that part of themselves. It's more impactful when you're actually speaking from a place of experience rather than, arts education is important, things
Right.
like that.
Right. Which I mean, that's an important narrative, and the administrators that are working in those fields are
Right.
so important as well. But you're right. There's a power
Absolutely.
about
Yeah.
modeling a life.
Yeah.
And that idea that by so doing, we empower other people to find their own voices and
Yeah.
their own stories, and perhaps feel emboldened to express them in some way.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I sure hope so, because the world doesn't need a bunch of people doing what they think is going to be leading to their like material success. The world needs people that are illumined and awakened to what their gifts and talents are, I think. And I mean, I don't diss or knock anybody that's doing things that aren't, it doesn't mean your entire life has to be, oh, I have to drop everything that's doing to support my life to go and do this thing that appears to be my calling. But I think there's like a dissonance when the community that you are a part of may not value your contribution in the way that your spirit is longing for it to be valued. And so having some being able to lean on an intrinsic source of motivation as opposed to an extrinsic sort of source of motivation for moving through life and moving through the world is the way that I've been able to contend with some of the more difficult times in my life and throughout. I mean, we've all been through a difficult time this last year, but when you're motivated intrinsically as opposed to extrinsically, in my experience, you're more able to weather these storms. And so, yeah, it's important to me. So.
I have wondered if some people, and I'm just, one thing that I love about this show, I was just actually talking with a friend earlier today. He said, what do you do with Tomes and Tunes? Do you prepare questions ahead of time? And I said, really I don't. Like, my role or my goal, I think, when I show up on the show in conversation with a guest is to just pay attention and listen and be curious. And one of the things that you're sparking in me in my mind right now is, I've thought a lot about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation myself, and you're making me wonder if I am incredibly intrinsically motivated. I think that every single songwriter that has ever been on this show, I think artists in general are incredibly intrinsically motivated, because it's a hard road
Yeah.
to travel. It's not, it's hard only because I think it's specifically unique to each of us. And so it's not like, I'm not saying that being a doctor is easy, but the road, at least the pathway, you get into school, you go through that, you go through the other thing, residency, doctor, like the path at least is carved. You have to achieve along the way. But for us, because of the nature of what we're doing, we're creating things out of not out of nothing, but we're combining them and crafting things out of the raw material, I guess. And so each path that we each take is going to be completely unique to each of us. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, I'm wondering if everybody is ideally intrinsically motivated, but it's tamped down in some people. And so instead of, I don't know, it takes a certain amount of bravery, I guess. Instead of that bravery of following, of overcoming fear and following the curiosity, for that intrinsic path, the intrinsic rewards. I wonder if the extrinsic rewards they're easier to see, they're easier to grasp out. I'm just wondering, are there some people that are wired one way versus the other way, or are we all naturally wired for internal reward, but it's a scary path, and so then we pile on gold and whatever the external reward is. I don't know.
I think no matter what you choose to do with your time, this existence, however you believe it to be, whether it's finite and there's nothing after, or there's a continuation in some way, it's designed to test and grow an individual. Like, so if you're extrinsically motivated and you really thrive, like that is the mechanism through which you achieve growth and you build capacity throughout your life, then the world will both reward that and also test that throughout your existence, I think. And if you're intrinsically motivated, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think it's so dichotomous as maybe the example of a person who's an accountant and says that they're not creative because they don't play an instrument. Like, my goal is to get rid of that dichotomous way of thinking about our existence, in that, we do have, I think we have human needs of community and belonging. And there is a certain amount of, like, I think there is a difference in temperament and character for people that choose to go down the less traveled road versus people that choose a more safe path. But there are no safe paths in this existence, in my view. You know what I mean? And if you're thinking about it, if I'm thinking about it in terms of like both a material and a sort of metaphysical, spiritual reality, which is kind of how I move through the world, I don't see those two things as separate, but mirrors of an existence, of a reality. And if I was looking at it purely materially, then I might look at the craft of being an artist, an actor, a painter, a writer, and look at the quality of the art and be very materialist in my judgment of what is good art, what is bad art, and suggest that there are some people that are just good artists and they've arrived at this place and they just are, and there's some people that aren't, and then I would maybe weigh the value of that methodology of ordering a life, like becoming an artist and making that a prime focal point in your motivation throughout life. And I might suggest that that's of less value than somebody who is producing something that is materially tangible and valuable to a market in immediate ways that I can measure, because artistic consumption and like these experiential things that we all know art produces in our being, and like even just like the attraction to beauty being one, like that when you are exposed to art, it makes you feel things. Like that's not necessarily measurable in a GDP kind of way. And so if that's,
Right.
if I'm a materialist, then I might look to that and suggest
Right.
that it's not a worthwhile thing. And so I think though that the pursuits of engaging with one's creative capacity and developing it and cultivating it is one of those things that is maybe it's like analogous to some sort of intrinsic faith. I don't know if faith is the right word.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. I think faith
because
means something different to different people, but to me, yes.
yeah, I mean because you're not what if you make bad art? Does that devalue the whole experience, you know? Like what if you do, you know, what if I mean I think it's the act of going inner and fighting demons that nobody can see versus the extrinsic sort of, you know, if I'm a good provider, if I'm good at making money, if I'm good at providing a service that people actively need in a one-to-one sort of way. Like, you know, I'm a grocery store clerk, I'm providing food for my community, I'm a farmer, I'm this or that. But all of them, all of these things, like if you specifically separate these two worlds out and suggest that one is more valuable than the other, it doesn't track, like it doesn't actually measure up in the longer term. And I think that's when the society becomes imbalanced and we start becoming in despair because you're ignoring one aspect of your reality.
Right.
You know, it's like that you're focusing on one to the detriment of the other. And especially in times of like suffering and difficulty, like it's really easy to be like, okay, I'm in survival mode,
Right.
and I need to eat. So what is going to make me the return on my investment the most, my time investment? And art is quite frankly and quite regularly not the thing.
Right.
But
We're very focused on the corporeal
yeah,
aspect of ourselves, of our survival, and the spiritual part is sort of perceived as optional cherry on
Yeah.
top, right?
Or something that you
and you're
do
saying
when-
it's essential layers.
I think so. And as an
Yeah.
artist, you go when you're delving into the creative muse or whatever it is that you want to call it, this like thing that we tap into when we make art, you know, we become channels for that thing. I mean, the process of getting your own ego and your own fear and your own all of these things out of the way so that you can actually even put pen to paper. Some people find it easier than others. I have a pretty loud set of gargoyles and dragons behind in the back of my brain. That's the stuff. So for me, as a spiritual and material being, a spiritual being having a material experience, one of the things that was important to me when I thought about, okay, how am I going to spend my time, was, am I going to do the stuff? If I say that I believe all of these things, you know, I say that these things are important. Am I, Yosi, going to do the things that are difficult and scary for me, that aren't sure things, that aren't, you know, secure, but that my intuition is telling me are important? Am I going to listen to that voice and figure out a way to make it work with the material existence? So I'm not going to ignore the fact that I have to eat, but how am I going to walk in that knowing if I really believe that that's a thing? And so, so that's kind of where you find me now, you know, and I'm not great at it, but it's kind of that, the work of music for me has been a lot of grappling with my own internal belief systems and really destructing and reconstructing things that make sense to me internally, so that my internal architecture, regardless of what's going on out there, I can be like, okay, I'm secure, I'm safe, I know who I am, I know what this is, and I know how I contribute meaningfully to the world around me, you know?
Well, so if your parents were not supportive of this path of music for you, that speaks to one level of foundation for a person, where they come from, their parents, the narrative in the household. How did you deconstruct that foundation and rebuild this other architecture that you're talking about, when those two things are in
contrast?
It seems direct opposition. Yeah,
it's a process, because I should be clear. My parents loved music, and in fact, like the first guitar that I ever picked up when I was 12, my dad fixed a classical guitarist's car in college or something, and she gave it as like a trade for the labor. It's this red Washburn. It's not a very, it's fine. But it was a good first starter guitar, but my parents wouldn't let me play it. So I had all these instruments around, but my dad would say, okay, you can't play the guitar. We're not going to get you lessons for the guitar or anything like that until you learn the piano. And I'd be like, can I get lessons for the piano? And they'd be like, no, you have to figure it out yourself. So this was the way of like, valuing arts education as a thing that's supplemental for like whatever else you're going to do as a scientist. They really, wanted to encourage sort of, I took interest in psychology, and I took interest in marine life, and they were like, you could be a marine biologist and sing to the dolphins, that kind of vibe. So it's like there was this misfiring, like they wanted to be supportive, but really what they were instilling is a support of, we understand that this has value, but also we're terrified because we're in an environment where, my dad is a first generation immigrant to the United States, and fled Iran during the revolution when there was extreme persecution. There still is extreme persecution, but during that time they were trying to oust everybody that was in a position of authority in the government that identified as a Baha'i. The Baha'i is a religious minority in Iran, and so that was kind of the family story. So they went from that position in society of kind of, I think my grandfather was some general under Pahlavi in the government doing like finance stuff or something. It's all a little hazy, to moving almost overnight to the United States. And what the immigrant story in the United States is, you move here to secure a life for your kids and to, yes, contribute to the society around you, but the value of a life changes because now you're having to reconstruct an existence in a new space. So I have a lot of empathy for my parents in that, so I just want to make that clear first, that they were both supportive and not supportive. But what did it for me was internal architectures that are built in childhood are really powerful, and gone unchallenged, they tend to be adopted by you in adulthood and throughout life. Like you don't really question them until you absolutely have to.
Right.
For me, my parents got divorced when I was 12.
Oh, so that framework starts to
starts to shatter. Right,
yeah.
Because all of a sudden you, at a formative age, see your caretakers as painfully human. Yeah. And
that's a powerful experience for parents to divorce in terms of the kid and how when my folks split up, I was in my 20s, early 20s, but even I felt it then. I was no longer living at home, but I felt that that solidity, that it had been this impenetrable wall. Yeah. All of a sudden there were cracks. I felt myself, I could flow somehow a little better in my own self with that wall sort of cracked.
Yeah, because it's like we're not trying to hold up this lattice work of this facade of everything being whatever it was. And for me, like the nature of that relationship and that relationship destructing was that I was required then to analyze a lot of the things, the beliefs that had been shared in my household. Right. That were like lip service from my parents. They weren't necessarily from their faith tradition or from this or that. They were just like things that they had come to through their own trauma and their own suffering and challenges, and also their own wisdom throughout life, right? And this is the natural, the child surpasses the parent, the student like surpasses the teacher, all these things, where it's not better, it's just you have to look at critically in order to survive, almost like mentally be able to handle the fact that everything you thought was true may or may not be true. Like it's not that it's not true, it's just that it might not, which is almost worse because the uncertainty is almost worse because you then have this work of like going through and sifting through all these things. And at 12, like trying to figure that stuff out. I was really fortunate because my mom moved us to the only city in Oregon. We moved from Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane. My dad had joined the Air Force. And we moved to Corvallis, Oregon, which I was just going into 7th grade, and the middle school had a program, a guitar program. It was the only one in the entire state. So if that's not, some sort of confirmation, I don't know what is. But we took my dad's old guitar that I was never allowed to play, and guitar, and leaning into the gift that I knew I always had, but that I had to kind of dampen. Like, I would sing in the shower, and like my parents would get annoyed and tell me to shut up. Like, it was that kind of vibe. All of a sudden I had an opportunity of a lot of alone time, a lot of autonomy, new autonomy now, because my mom was working to support 3 kids, and putting herself through school at that point. And so I got a lot of time to sit with the philosophies of my parents, and also my faith, the Baha'i faith, and really kind of contend with, do I believe these things? What is this? How does this apply? And fortunately for me, art is the backdrop of this processing. But my faith has a lot to say about the place and function of art, and the place and function of intuition, and taking the notion of confirmation, that you take a step and you take another step, and you don't know what's going to happen, but based off of that information you take another step. So it's less absolutist in that everybody should do this, and more like, let's look at reality with this scientific model of try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. And so these kind of tools were instilled in me when I was in middle school, because of that isolation from that one way of thinking, and then also support from the community that ended up kind of embracing me there, the artist community as well as my Baha'i community. So
I feel like you just sort of in certain ways throughout this conversation have been piecing together a recipe for the development from a child into an artist, that necessary fracturing of the childhood foundation at particularly that age, 12. I mean, that is when, as it probably didn't feel good at the time, but that's a time of immense change for everybody, and that is when childhood is kind of cracking apart anyway, and then to have that additional fracture of the parental unit,
right,
and then that isolation, that time alone that you had, that instrument that was there, and then all of a sudden the teachers that appeared, the community that supported that, all of those things as elements into, pour it all into this, cauldron, put it on some fire, and then the heat of transformation, out pops a songwriter.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a song that I wrote that I played at Far West. So in 2019, I think, was the last time we had Far West. Far West, for those of you that don't know, is a chapter of the International Folk Alliance, and they have
the Folk Alliance Region West. Yeah. So it covers the whole western part of the United States and Canada. And you're right, that 2019 conference, I was at that as well. And it was in person. It was here in out near Los Angeles, and then this year it's happening in a couple of weeks, the conference virtually. Are you doing it?
I bought my ticket, and everybody who's here, even if you're not a musician, but if you like live music, there's a ticket tier that you can purchase that will allow you to come and listen to the various immensely talented and diverse musical contributors that go every year. And I would strongly suggest it if you need a little bit of, music and spice in your life in October, because it's just good. So
100%. That's just so, as long as you're doing a little plug for it, I'll just say it's October 14th through 16th. And it's all virtual. So there'll be some concerts and educational panels and all kinds of stuff. You know what? I'll put that one in the chat box. So continue. Let's continue with this.
So I wrote this song, which is kind of my version of a hero's journey, which is pretty autobiographical. I probably shouldn't be telling everyone my secrets, because then they won't want to listen to the song anymore. But it's called Fire and Gold, and it kind of follows what I've been telling you. This internal. It's not a this happened and then this happened song, but it's like a what we go through. What I think every human goes through on some level to get back to where one starts, which is this sort of open, curious interested, like willing to experience ups and downs to enjoy the beauty of life. Like these things that we take on narratives from other people that then end up closing us down in various ways. And the song is about coming to a certain point and recognizing, having looked back on a life, whatever that might be, like recognizing the pattern of what is happening to you, what has happened to you, and seeing purpose and value and meaning in it, as opposed to, maybe just thinking that we're just a collection of, randos doing random things.
Moment to moment to moment, instead looking to the past and gleaning wisdom from those challenges that have presented themselves. And and then doing that step-by-step progress that you were talking about before.
Yeah, and the beauty would be, and my goal, I guess my personal, individual, spiritual Yosi goal is this notion of being able to see the end in the beginning and to not allow the fear that I deeply feel, like I deeply, deeply hold. That's one of the biggest, loudest gremlins in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Not allowing that to overshadow the wisdom of knowing. Because at a certain point, it's like, whatever that might be for you, you come through life having won or lost the battles, internal and external battles of you trying to present in ways that are appropriate and effective and successful for everyone else, and ignoring yourself, sort of thing.
Right, yeah.
We all come through that, and at a certain point, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And
well, it's like building all of that, putting the weight of that stuff all on top of a shaky foundation at some point.
Right.
And I have actually gone through that myself.
Oh, yeah?
That
Tell
building up on top of that shaky foundation, and then at some point the foundation just collapses, everything comes down, and at that time I was just scraped entirely to the bottom.
Yeah.
And that was actually for me, I mean, I think that a version of that has happened several times in my life.
Yeah.
As is, in the hero's journey, since you mentioned it, that comes around again. But there was one big time in my life where it really completely happened. And that was such a tender time of not knowing and being completely present in the moment. And it lasted for a long time. It took years and a lot of work to and the thing about the work though that came after was that it was much more mindful than it had been previously. Right, because I realized how hard it is if you're building a skyscraper on top of a shaky foundation, if the whole thing comes down the second time around, you're going to be really careful with that foundation, because you're going to realize that by the time you get to the 50th floor, if you want to build something solid, you don't want to have this pattern of crumbling and building and crumbling and building. You want to just start carefully as best as you can, but you don't always know. You work with what you know.
Right, and that's part and parcel with living. The challenge is that if one thinks, and I am guilty of this all the time, that if one thinks that the purpose is the destination and not the journey, then one could look at a fallen skyscraper, as you mentioned, and come to a place where I'm too afraid to rebuild a foundation. Right. Because what if that foundation that I worked so hard to build betrays me again? Right. And then that's actually a theme in the book series that I was thinking about talking about.
Oh, great segue. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah. Like all these themes.
Take us there.
I mean, all these themes are really, really profound to me, because this is the real stuff of life.
I agree. Yeah.
And there's this series called the Stormlight Archive, which have you read it?
I haven't heard of it. No.
Oh, it's so good. If you like fiction, and you like fantasy, and you like lots and lots of characters, some you hate, some you like, sharing their various perspectives. Like if you like that kind of universe, sort of Game of Thronesy, but a little less. It's not Game of Thrones, but
I'm sorry, I couldn't get past that first. I tried. I watched the first episode. I was like, you know what? Between the beheadings and the incest, I was like, this just isn't my cup of tea.
You're like, nah,
I'm like,
it's
wow,
not
I
a
can't
vibe.
believe this is so popular because
Yeah,
that
it's not a
says
vibe.
that this is the cup of tea that everyone else is drinking from.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
okay.
No, it's not. So it's not that. So if you
But I
hate
understand what you
that-
mean about the world building and all of the
yeah, it's
characters.
kind of
and,
it's like that. And the books. So
Right.
my brother sent me the audiobooks when I was going through something really intense because
Okay.
we're pretty similar in a lot of ways. And so I started listening to it. But it there's so many beautiful quotes, and I think I'm just gonna share one with you about. It's really short. It says, "Failure is the mark of a life well lived. In turn, the only way to live without failure is to be of no use to anyone.
Right.
Trust me, I've practiced."
Yeah.
So
Just a cower in fear, afraid to make a step because you're
yeah.
afraid of failing. And I'm a huge fan of process and just like that rather than product. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
this whole show, Tomes and Tunes, if I had waited to understand what the show was about and how to do it perfectly before I started, I would not have even started at this point.
Yeah.
And this is the 70th episode. And I was just saying to that friend I was talking to earlier about the interviews, you know, I think that somewhere around episode 60, I started to understand, like, oh, yeah, okay, now I'm seeing the shape of this. Now I'm seeing how to do the show. That was over a year of doing this show every week,
Right.
you know? So,
Yeah, you pick up things along the way, but if you never,
Yeah.
what is Brene Brown talks about the arena? It's one of the themes, and artists, we talk about this kind of in the hushed halls, you know, or when we're meeting up, you know.
which is
this-
what this is,
yeah,
Tomes
the
and
hushed
Tunes, right?
halls. You know, talk about, you know, the difference between being in the arena and being adjacent to the arena of endeavor, whatever that might be, looking in and pining and wishing and hoping.
Right.
At some point, you just got to get your hands in the dirt
Yeah.
and start digging. And that, for me, so, you know, this factoring back to, you know, the how does one reconstruct a new internal architecture that takes the good parts and leaves the bad parts. That's what I'm currently trying to do, is just
beautiful.
really trying to get over my ego, like the sensitive, sad child, you know, from that's always going to be with me and is with everybody, and really kind of be like, what would the worst possible outcome of this be? Okay, what would the best possible outcome be? What would the worst possible outcome of being of remaining where I am, remaining at a place of kind of an amateur in whatever endeavor? What would the worst possible outcome of that be? Well, I know what it is because
Right.
you
You've
know,
lived it to this point.
I've lived it to this
Right.
point. Yeah, I know that, you know, myself personally go through cyclical experiences of living my life for other people to an extreme and then ignoring the calling that I keep on paying lip service to. Like I say, I'm a songwriter. I say I'm supposed to be doing this, but
Right.
have I written a song in, you know, XYZ? Like, have I
Yeah.
actually been in my practice? Maybe
Yeah.
not. And I go through this over and over again. And so for me, the work of writing and also the work of engaging with fiction, like the fiction that I love that's the best is fiction that is talking about the human condition in a
Yeah.
more expansive way, and not a way that allows itself to become reductive of the human experience into a series of dichotomies and rights
Right.
and wrongs.
Right.
And that's what the Stormlight Archive, I feel like, does. There's so many themes and motifs throughout that series, but a lot of it about what is the worth and value of a human being, what is the importance of endeavor and striving, what do we do when we fail, you know, what does it mean, like these things. That's the theme of my life, is this sort of hero's journey, trying to chew on
Yeah.
those themes. And so I constantly go back to that series because it just feels so good.
Gosh, I want to say a couple things.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued. I wrote down the title. I'm super intrigued. So first of all, I got to say about the hero's journey. There's a woman named Maureen Murdoch who has done a lot of work for, I think, the last 25 years on the heroine's journey, which you might be interested in.
sounds
And in
great.
fact, I think the title of her book that I think just had the 25th anniversary is The Heroine's Journey. Maria Tartar, who is out of Harvard, she is sort of a preeminent scholar on fairy tales. I studied her a little bit when I was diving into Grimm's fairy tales, and I was trying to uncover the history of the wicked stepmother narrative. So I was doing a lot of work on that. And so I was reading a lot of Maria Tartar's work. But I just read an article yesterday in the New York Times that next month she is coming out with a book called 1001 Faces. And it is the heroine's journey also. So anyway, this might be in your realm also.
What about you?
Thing,
yeah.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to say is that I'm currently, so I also do the audio book, and then I also have the paper books, and I'm constantly moving between the two. If I'm out for a walk, it's the audio book. If I'm in bed, it's the physical book. But the audio book that I just started listening to is Rebecca Solnit's Field Guide to Getting Lost. And she's a brilliant thinker and writer, and I love the part that I just passed as I was listening and doing dishes yesterday, where she talks about I mean, the thing about Rebecca Solnit, if for anybody who's not familiar with her, is that she goes deep, where a lot of times someone will kind of say an idea and then that's it, that's all you get. But if she keeps prodding it and going around it, looking at it from all directions. And so Field Guide to Getting Lost, she's really exploring this idea of what it means to get lost in various ways, on a spiritual level, on a physical level. And one of the things that she said was, you know, essentially that being lost is when our world has expanded beyond our understanding of it. And when we allow ourselves to be in that unknown piece, rather than being familiar with all the corners and therefore not lost, when we allow ourselves to step beyond that, beyond the limitations of our unknowing, that's where true expansion happens. Like the world is getting bigger. I mean, the world is infinitely big, right? But how small do we live? Because we choose, as Elizabeth Gilbert might say, fear over curiosity. You know, but when we choose that idea of curiosity, you know, it constantly pushes us forward. And something that I think a lot about is, and I've talked about it probably on this show, although I don't think for a while, those old cartographer maps, the really beautiful ancient maps. And, you know, beyond the continent of what we knew, inevitably there are the, you know, there's the sea, and there are the sea serpents and the dragons. There be dragons. And I have you know, many times, but especially in recent years, found myself standing on the edge of the continent of my knowing, which inevitably is a big, you know, further along than what it had been, you know, 10 years ago or whatever. But here I am on the edge of the continent of what I know, and I'm looking out, and I have this desire to explore and discover and go out into that unknown. You know, but that moment of fear when you're standing on that edge, or even once you have kind of left the continent and you're in the middle of the sea, it's like, oh my gosh, there might be serpents here, and it's so tempting to go back.
That's right.
To the shore, right? And instead, you know, just I try to remind myself, oh yeah, that's right, I'm in the there be dragons territory right now. It's like, just sit with that for a moment, realize that, you know, I've left what I'm familiar with. I'm far enough away that I can't even see the shore, but I can't yet see the shore of where I hope I'm going, and I just have to be at ease, or at least breathe through and keep moving forward through this, you know, ocean of the unknown, really.
And you know, that's another thing. I was looking for the quote. There's another quote from that book series, and I'm gonna butcher it, but it says something to the effect of, the most important is not the first step or the second step, it's the next step. The most important step of the journey is the next step, that you've come this far and you're moving on to the next thing. And I mean, I talk about the gremlins a lot with the people, with my friends that are,
those are those things behind you, those voices are,
those little, you know, things trying to convince you.
For me, it's the dragons. For you, it's the gremlins.
Dragons, gremlins, whatever, you know. Fear is a big motivator, in like sort of like a motivator that is so biologically.
Well, it keeps us safe.
It keeps us safe,
but it keeps us small.
That's right. Yeah, and it's tricky because the living of a life, no matter who you are, it's never been done before the way that you're going to do it. And so,
and so therefore it has value.
Right.
So important.
And so that's where I think, and I feel like this is so valuable, what you've created here. And anytime there's a sort of well, an oasis in the desert for people of any background, but particularly musicians, to come together and compare notes, like the recognition that everybody is modeling to the best of their ability a life that they think is worth living, and just being able to honor that, and like honor the multiplicity of truth, the relativity of truth, to a certain degree, and the ability to hold space for that in others, at least for me, helps me hold space for it within my own journey and myself. Because for me, the thing that I learned from my family system was to sort of like overvalue everyone else and overvalue everyone else's experience and thought process about how something goes, and undervalue my own intrinsic experience. And so what better arena for having to contend with that particular imbalance than entering into an arena where nobody knows what the heck they're doing. Like we've got some models and some tools, but you really, as a person doing anything, creating something, manifesting something into existence, get to go into There Be Dragons land, like you were talking about, daily, and make friends with those voices. I think the Kurth Kitchen mentioned in the chat, she said, we love the sensitive, sad child. So the goal is not trying to throw her out, it's trying to make her feel safe so that you can continue taking the next right step and fail and be okay with the failure, So.
Well, here's what you and I both know, and I know that you know this, because just as songwriters who get up and perform in these intimate settings like house concerts and things like that, it's not that the person listening in the audience is taking what we're singing about, seeing our complete story, and completely identifying with that, but it's that by us sharing whatever it is we're sharing on stage, there's something about the edges, like this amorphous kind of shape, but that has mass of some sort, hits the listener's heart or mind or experience in a way that kind of shines a light on something. And I think that then they kind of walk away with this little, like, oh yeah, that little corner has been illuminated for me. And now they kind of carry that little corner, that bit of light, and then they describe that light, that thing, to someone else. Like now it's like twice removed from our experience, but now they shine that light, and then it hits someone else. It starts this chain, and I think that is one of the things that it's hard. I mean, it is amorphous, and this sort of goes back to what you were talking about before about material. Like it's very hard to numerically, financially, economically assess what is the value of a piece of art, because it's this thing, and yet somehow it has immense value because, this passing, it's like passing the torch around. Somehow it doesn't take the light from the first torch. It kind of creates more and more and more light shining, I mean, all of us have these dark corners in ourselves that we can't express. We can't figure. We haven't gotten the words yet. We haven't processed it enough. But then we hear this piece of music or read the story, and we're like, oh, that's right. Like that was like a bruise inside me that I didn't know was there. Right. I think I was just like, I mixed so many metaphors in that.
It's all right.
It's insane.
That's
but
what our job
there
is.
We go.
That's what our job is. We mix metaphors. We deal in shades of gray, Arielle.
Oh my gosh. Well, Yosi, did you want to share another book, or was that the one that you were going to share today?
Fiction, I just wanted to share this opinion book. So many people probably know the lore of art.
That cover looks exactly like the art of, because it is the same writer.
So it's the same writer.
Yeah.
So it's the next book in this series. So
Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield.
Stephen Pressfield. So
there we go.
so the what was it? the Stormlight Archive satisfies my spiritual, metaphysical, fantasy, brain, soul thing, where it's like, I get to be the audience member when I'm reading those books, right?
Do you know who the author is of the Stormlight Archive?
Stormlight Archive is by Brandon Sanderson, spelled like it sounds.
Brandon Sanderson?
Sanderson, yeah, Brandon Sanderson. And
I don't know if I have the E's and the O's in the right order, but there you go. I'm putting that in the chat.
Nope, that's right. That's right.
Amazing.
And
okay.
Yeah, so there's that, and then this is my Yosi needs a swift kick. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes I need to be like, go in a corner and lick my wounds and kind of shut down for a little while. And I do Stormlight Archive. And when I'm at that place where I feel strong again, then I go to Stephen Pressfield and his books, because they give me really practical, no nonsense ways of navigating this life that I've chosen for myself.
Yeah.
And one of the principles in that book and in The War of Art is the difference between like what wishing that you were acting as a pro, in his words, pro versus amateur, is this kind of like dichotomy that he uses to describe this, versus being an amateur. And the amateur still has the calling of the pro, but they haven't entered the arena yet. They're kind of putting a toe in, but then allowing fear to divert them away from what it is that they know they ought to be doing. And so the amateur finds themselves in a cyclical experience of, and I don't think it's to say that we all it's like a machine that you switch on or switch off, but it's helpful for me to have that particular map. We were talking about cartography a little bit.
Right.
All of these things are just maps of reality that help me not want to throw my laptop out the window in the morning, So
Right. Don't listen to those gremlins.
That's right. That's right. So there's that. That's my other one.
Love it. Yeah, I love the art of war, so I'm gonna, or no, the war of art. There we go. The war of art. And it is a nice like touchstone when you're feeling a little derailed. I've been very interested in the line, it's gray. I don't know if that's true, actually. I just said that. This is what I've been exploring, that line between, whether it's a hard line or, semi-permeable or permeable membrane, between hobbyist and professional.
Right.
And I've been having a lot of conversations with folks, particularly as we're talking about the Far West Conference, for example, because the community of music lovers is so beautiful, but at the center of music lovers are the professional musicians who are earning a living, who are working musicians, who need to, first of all, hone their craft, develop their musicianship, and then also travel and tour, stay over, leave home, all of the things that go along with that. And so, how can organizations like that best support the work of the professional musicians and also support the work of the community that, they're the music fans. So it's like how, we're not separate, we're in a relationship for sure, but, how to get that working really well.
Yeah.
I want to share this book, Heads of the Colored People, by Nafisa Thompson Spires. I did a stint when I was getting my MFA in creative writing. I was the editor-in-chief of a literary and art journal called Lunch Ticket. And I first encountered Nafisa because she submitted, and we very, very happily published her piece, Fatima the Billiquist, a transformation story, which ended up, I think, maybe a year or 2 years after that, that story was part of this book that was published. I can't remember when this book was published, but in any case, I was thinking about, I won't share a lot of this because I want to get to the music, but I was thinking about with you as I started the conversation, how I sort of was aware of your identity, like how you have so much claimed identity. And I wanted to share a little bit of the very first story in this book because it is also about identity and also about as creators of something, music, story, art, we sort of, every time we enter that new piece of art, we define the rules of the world. Right? Like we make a decision about what are the rules of this song, and the audience, if we are solid with it, If we adhere to the rules that we set up, the audience will be right there with us. And so I think the rules that she kind of sets up, the craft rules or the narrative rules that she sets up here, for me, are interesting. So I'll just read a little piece of this. Riley wore blue contact lenses and bleached his hair, which he worked with gel and a blow dryer and a flat iron some mornings into Sonic the Hedgehog spikes so stiff you could prick your finger on them, and sometimes into a wispy side-swooped bob with long bangs. And he was black. But this wasn't any kind of self-hatred thing. He'd read The Bluest Eye and Invisible Man in school, and even picked up Disgruntled at a book fair. And yes, they were good, and there was some resonance in those books for him. But this story isn't about race or, quote, the shame of being alive, or any of those things. He was not self-hating. He was even listening to Drake, though you could make it Fetty Wap if his appreciation for trap music changes something for you. Because all that's relevant here is that he wasn't against the music of his people or anything like that, as he walked down Figueroa with his earbuds pushed in just far enough as to not feel itchy. Riley was wearing the wispy, swooped version of his bangs and listening to Drake or Fetty, and he was black with blue contacts and bleached blonde hair. And yes, there are black people who have both of those things naturally without the use of artificial accoutrements. So we can move past the whole phenotypically this or biologically that discussion to the meat of things. And if there's something meta in this narrator's consciousness and self-consciousness, or this overindulgent aside, it isn't meta for the sake of being meta. This narrator's consciousness is just letting you know about said consciousness up front, like a raised black fist, to get the close reading out of the way and make space for Riley, who was the kind of black man for whom blue eyes and blonde hair were not natural. He was the kind of black that warranted, or invited without solicitation, comparisons to drinks from Starbucks, or lyrics from Lady Marmalade, or chocolate bars with nuts. You would think that his blue contacts and unnaturally blonde hair set against dark chocolate mocha choca latte ya skin, and yes, there is some judgment in the use of you, that Riley would date white or Asian women exclusively, or perhaps that he liked men. But you'd be wrong on all counts, as Riley was straight, and he dated widely among black women, and he was neither in denial, nor on the down low, nor, like John Mayer, equal opportunity and united colors of Benetton in life, but as separate as the fingers of the hand in sex. Nor like Frederick Douglass, or many others working on black rights in public and going home to a white wife. And there's no judgment against Douglass here, just facts for the sake of descriptive clarity. Riley liked black women, both their blackness and womanness, and the overlap between these constructs. Nor was Riley queer-phobic or the type of man to utter no homo in uncomfortable situations, because Riley was comfortable enough, if enough expresses a sort of educated awareness. There's so much awareness in these two paragraphs that I've hardly made space for Riley. And I just love, yes, it is 3 paragraphs actually, just the beginning of this chapter, this story, at how, in such a meta way, she is trying to describe Riley, but has all of this other side conversation, mind chatter, the gremlins, or whatever you want to call it, in the background, stepping back, just to go forward.
Isn't that funny, the way we do that?
Mm-hmm. Totally. All right. So there's my book. That probably share more of that next week.
I love that. What a good choice.
Thank you. Yeah. And you're a little bit quiet again now, but I think that you're about to get up on the microphone.
Far away.
Yeah. So don't go far away. Give us some music.
Okay. Do you get to choose.
Oh.
You can pick a song that I wrote recently, or you can pick the song that I wrote recently before that song. The song that I wrote recently before that song is Fire and Gold, which I alluded to earlier.
Which you mentioned.
So we can play that, or I can play you the latest song that I created.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm going to throw this choice back at you, because I'm kind of curious about the Fire and Gold, but on this show, I have so often brought in songs that I have, like, barely finished writing, just barely out of the cooker, maybe, like, go back in the cooker for a little bit. So you're welcome to do whichever. Especially as we've just spent the whole show talking about process.
All right. Well, think I'm going to do Fire and Gold. I
Okay.
think that feels right.
Okay.
When I was a child, I was told it was beauty and brains that made me worthwhile. So I felt ashamed as I tried to live up to the expectations, always falling short, swimming lost and unsure in a sea of illusions, blind to my guiding star. When I got older, I crumpled at their slightest complaints. My anger, my friend, and the means to the end of my jailer, compulsive restraints. As I tried to live up to the expectations, always falling short, swimming lost and unsure in a sea of illusions, blind to my guiding star. And it's good to see what I'm seeing now, and it's good to know what I know, that the secret to living the good life is learning how to let go, letting go of perspectives that break me, letting go of the fears that control, feeling joy in the mystery unfolding, knowing fire tests the gold. In time, my captors forsook me, left me addicted, coerced. Or maybe I'd grown wild and unruly, written off as a burden or curse, as if trying to get back to the chains that bound me, grasping for things not meant for my hands, walking lost and unsure on that desert highway, sinking in the lonely sand. Thought I'd have a better plan. Time is such a cruel mistress. I was told that I would stay, but she would go. Time would leave me listless, 'cause fortune favors the bold. Oh, joy in the mystery unfolding, knowing fire tests the gold. Feeling joy in the mystery unfolding, knowing fire tests the gold.
Beautiful. Yeah, right on.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me. It was so
Yeah.
lovely to talk to you and get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, really lovely. Gosh, there were, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to you sing this just now. This is one of the nice things about doing this show, is
Yeah.
that you can go back. Harmonically, I loved what was happening, and it was referencing, you know, sort of a collage of other songs in my mind. But I can't put my finger on them, which is beautiful. And so I love that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I spent a bunch of time with your latest record release.
Oh, thank you.
I really, really enjoyed it. Did you produce it yourself?
No, it was produced by Shane Alexander. He is a singer-songwriter here in Los Angeles. He's phenomenal. You should dive into his catalog on Spotify as well, or wherever you listen to music. He was also a guest on this show twice, and both of those episodes are in the archives. One of them was, I think that they were about a year apart. So my first interview with him was, I think it was the week that the album was released. And this show is brand new. And then we did another interview right around the 1 year mark. But yeah, he was a wonderful producer. So I feel like my second and third album I co-produced with a composer in Los Angeles, or in Boston, where I used to live. And his name is Chris Florio, and it was such a beautiful, creative collaboration. I loved the way that we worked together, and it was such a different thing to sort of come to Shane, and I still had creative say, but I really kind of let go some of the controls there, and I let him guide the way. And he really did, like he took those songs in as his own, and I love what he did with them.
It's such a pleasure to listen to. So
Thank you.
all of my friends that are still here, like, you should go on Spotify or wherever you get your things and listen to her catalog, because it's really phenomenal and I really enjoyed it. But what are you going to play for us?
Well, I'll just pop my website. People can find it at my website, and it'll put them onto whatever music platform. So I've been writing some new songs now, and actually I just talked with Shane a couple times last week. Had some, like, our initial conversations about doing the next album. And so it's just a question of funding at this point. I've got to figure that piece out. But the songs, Shane and I together, like, I played him a bunch of songs, but I was pretty sure which ones I wanted, and so this is one of those songs, yeah, we'll see how long, however long it takes to get funding, then plus the recording time, and so, who knows when that album will come out, but this is a song, called Miracle, and it's sort of about the sort of the randomness of life, and yet, I mean, I think that one person, maybe my earlier version of myself, would say that it's all random, and then my person who I am now, kind of feels this, like, reverence for it. Even if it's random, it feels like a miracle, and so the song is a little bit about that.
Relatable.
Deep in the Pacific, a sink my feet into the foam, looking out on the horizon where the ocean touches the unknown. Hands and knees beside a tide pool, filling buckets for a mold, while my daydreams are drifting by. You've built a castle with a moat. Ooh, I call it a miracle. You call it unpredictable odds. And maybe I'm more sense and sensibility. Maybe you're more Star Wars and Disney, spinning the teacups faster and faster. I'm looking up for the belt of Orion, beyond the circle of airplanes flying. You're up on LA Stars award show fashion. Ooh, I call it a miracle. Seems improbable the chances when I think of space and time. We'd even land in the same country. You say, what a lucky roll of dice. Ooh, I call it a miracle. And maybe I'm more sense and sensibility. Maybe you're more Star Wars and Disney, spinning the teacups faster and faster. I'm looking up for the belt of Orion, beyond the circle of airplanes flying. You're up on LA Stars award show fashion. Ooh, I call it a miracle. You call it unpredictable odds. Ooh, I call it a miracle. Maybe I'm more sense and sensibility. Maybe you're more Star Wars and Disney, spinning the teacups faster and faster and faster. I'm looking up for the belt of Orion, beyond the circle of airplanes flying. You're up on LA Stars award show fashion. Ooh, I call it a miracle. Call it a miracle.
I would clap, but I did it bad. I was trying to get that thing out of my face, but clap. That's so lovely. Thank you for sharing that with me. So that's new, huh?
It is new, yeah. And your song is new as well.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been recorded. That's what I'm, before this we were talking, I'm in the process of, I was in Los Angeles, I'm moving to Oregon. I'm in Klamath Falls right now, and in Oregon I'm going to be working on my next record. So awesome. I don't think I'll beat you to it, but maybe we should vie. Maybe we should see who can get there.
Oh my gosh. Are you producing it yourself, or are you working with a producer?
I mean, at this point I'm going to be producing it myself, but I'm kind of on the hunt, so I'm looking around for aesthetics that I like, and I really liked your last record and how it was produced and stuff. So I was wondering. That's why I was wondering. I was like, did you produce that? Because that's so cool.
Oh yeah, I'd like to say yes, and
I know.
But Shane, Shane Alexander. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm so glad I see a couple of people that I know that are part of my community here. So when you do your crowdfunding or however it is that you're going to get backing, let me know and I'll send it out, because now we're friends. So
we are, and you know what? I couldn't help but think this whole time how much fun we would have just in a car talking and driving going to shows, playing shows together.
Yeah.
So sorry about that reverb. I just turned it off. But yeah, I look forward to hopefully playing shows with you sometime soon, and
I
all
would
the
love it.
conversations that we'll have before and after the show.
Yes, I would love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It was truly a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I'll see you at Far West, at the Far West Conference
That's
in a couple of
right.
weeks. So if I don't see you virtually before then, I'll see you there. Yosi, thank you so much for being here. Before you split, I just want to ask you one more question. Do you have anything in particular that you have to promote right now? Like, are you playing any shows or anything in particular that you'd like to kind of give a shout out about?
Okay, so this is the thing. So a bunch of stuff is on the cooker and in the works. So I guess what I would like to promote is my email list. So
There we go.
if you don't know me but you know me now and would like to connect with me further, I have an email list. It's when you go to my website, which is my name, Yosi Mesbah, and then the word music.com. It's the first page, and you can opt in to the email list, and it'll make you go and confirm it because they want to make sure that nobody's
Oh, I
opted
think
in
I
without
put
their
I put the wrong link. I put the connect link. If you want to send her a message, then you go to the link I just shared.
Oh yeah.
And if you
wanna do that.
actually want to join the email list, which is what Yosi is asking you to do, and I love that, join it there. And
email list is for plebs. You're not wrong, Mango Green, but I am a pleb. What can I tell you? You can also connect with me on Instagram and all the social medias and stuff. But when I have new things that come out, the email list gets notified. Especially if it's special. And if you sign up, you'll get a free downloadable link to a song that's not purchasable and not released. So there's your incentive if you wanna get something that nobody else has except for the people on the list, you can join. And the list is the Yosi Posse email list.
The Yosi Posse. I love
Yeah.
that. Also, I would say for folks also, besides getting on Yosi's list, please subscribe to her YouTube channel, find her on Spotify or wherever you listen to music, and follow, heart, all that stuff. Facebook, she also has a Facebook page and also an Instagram. And, you know, it might seem silly if you're like, oh yeah, I love Yosi's music, I'll find her. But we all have to support the artists that we love because it's not an easy path. And every single one of those clicks and follows and likes and subscribes and each person, it really makes a difference. It's like, you know, you think that one drop in the bucket doesn't go anywhere, but it's like, well, you know, all the drops, you know, fill that bucket. So
it's still me, it's still us on the other end, you know.
Yeah.
So that's my invitation to y'all. And then when I do new things, which will be they're in the works and they'll be out, but the email list will be the ones that get notified first. So come join us. I promise I don't bite.
The Kurth Kitchen says, do it now, folks. And Yosi and I say yes. Do what the Kurth Kitchen says to do. And we will all be happy. Thank you, Yosi. I will see you in the green room. This is me booting you off the stream. Awkward moment. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thanks for listening. Obviously, the show, you can catch the replay on it wherever you are watching. It's on YouTube. I have on my YouTube page, I have a playlist for Tomes and Tunes, and you can find all the archives, or almost all the archives, on my website. There's a Tomes and Tunes dedicated page there, and you can listen to this episode over and over and over again, so you can hear Yosi play that beautiful song, because it's not yet recorded. And you can also see my interview with Shane Alexander, for example, or the creator of Electric Moon. He's in there too, Arthur Autumn, and a whole bunch of other really wonderful songwriters. It's been 70 episodes of fantastic, inspiring conversations. I have just found so much new music, and so I put my guests for Tomes and Tunes, I always add their music to the Spotify playlist, Tomes and Tunes Spotify playlist. So there's all that. In terms of what I have to promote, I would love you to be on my mailing list if you would like to join. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support what I'm doing on this show. However you think of it in your mind. If you think that you're putting the support to this show, of course we have the platform costs that are offset by that and all of that stuff, but also that Patreon supports me as a songwriter, and I share stories and songs right here from my shed. I call it Arielle's Shed of Songs and Stories and Wonder. And so if you would like to be a part of that shed of songs and stories and wonder, that would be wonderful. I'd love to have you as part of the Patreon. They get insider perks, insider stories, and the bootlegs to brand new songs like the song I played today, Miracle. Tonight at 7:30 Pacific, I am going to be on the other side of an interview. Arthur Autumn is going to be the creator of electricmoon.org. He is going to be interviewing me at the virtual site of Electric Moon. Go over to electricmoon.org and just poke around and explore. It's a really freaking cool 3D experience, and we are going to be there at 7:30 Pacific tonight talking. It's the first episode of his new Artist to Artist series, and I think he's going to ask me to play a song or two, so there'll be that. What else? That's it. Next week we have Siobhan O'Brien for episode 71. I'm super excited to talk with Siobhan. So tune in next week, same place, same time. Until then, please take good care. I would say get your vaccination if you don't already. Wear your masks. Let's kick this COVID thing to the curb. All right. See you soon.